Preparations for an early presidential election are underway here in South Korea, and the foreign media has been quick to touch upon this reality. We have more in Press Perspective today. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, April 7th here in Seoul, and you're watching Press Perspective. I'm Min Sunhee. Come early summer this year, South Korea will have a new leadership at the top office after the strength of its democracy went on full display last week, according to a number of foreign media outlets. For more on this, I have Chloe Borgnon with French broadcaster France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Hello, I'm very pleased to be here again.
Right, I also have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI. Thomas, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, great to be here.
Now, you also covered the Constitutional Court's verdict to uphold the presidential impeachment last Friday. Quite a number of foreign media outlets, Thomas, have linked this latest development to South Korea's democratic resilience. What more can you tell us about the perspective, this particular perspective, of course, among the foreign press?
Yeah, I would say that it was definitely a key, central part of the framing of how this story was ultimately told. South Korean democracy was challenged by Yoon's martial law decree, but it held firm. And I think even the way it ultimately came down, the unanimous decision by the Constitutional Court, and then even, the surprising kind of lack of a backlash afterwards. Chloe and I actually ran into each other outside after the result, and we were both sort of wondering where were the crowds. We were near kind of Gyeongbokgung Palace, expecting to see either big supporters or big protests, and it was really quiet afterwards, which I think surprised a lot of foreign media. And even I saw one survey, I think yesterday or the day before, that something like 80% of the public, this was like a Real Meter poll, said they accepted the verdict. So there's something about that I think was kind of a stellar example maybe of democracy working. And I think also in just telling the story, a lot of the kind of post-mortem of like, how did we get here? How did this happen? Really focused on Yoon kind of really badly misunderstanding or miscalculating how strongly, particularly the public, was going to react, and even the military and the police, in the very early hours of the martial law declaration, how kind of they didn't really have an appetite to go fully into it, and just how quickly the public showed up to kind of push back against this. And I think that was a big miscalculation on his part, and it sort of also showed just how entrenched people's belief and desire to maintain democracy has been. And it kind of even stands out, I think, globally. So much of the world is facing, so many different countries are facing their own challenges to democracy. Democracy's backsliding. Certainly the US is facing a kind of a challenge to the system. And so I think South Korea also stands out in that regard as a country that addressed a really serious issue and seems to have emerged on the kind of democratic side of it. But I would say also, that said, a lot of coverage and certainly analysis and opinion kind of coverage has pointed out that still South Korea is facing a lot of challenges going forward. South Korean democracy is, and in some ways, this whole period of Yoon's martial law impeachment process has kind of exacerbated polarization that was already here, but really has taken it to another level that I had never seen before, of just the rise of kind of extremist beliefs and conspiracy theories. And so it's sort of like that's not necessarily going to go away. I mean, there's this whole belief that the last election was fraudulent. So, I mean, how is that going to play out in an upcoming election? So, I mean, there are still deep divisions in the the democratic system. I think that we'll have to see how that plays out. I was thinking of it in terms of I think the people showed that they believe and are willing to fight and uphold democracy. The institutions held up, the justice system, but we'll have to see how is the politics going to do the politicians deserve, or will they be able to live up to this representation of democracy?
Right, and before we touch upon that then, Chloe, like Thomas mentioned earlier, the decision to uphold the presidential impeachment was unanimous. What do you suppose are the broader implications of this reality, according to, of course, the foreign press?
Yeah, so I would say foreign press and myself included in the report, the fact that it was unanimous, everyone was kind of saying that unanimity was kind of required just to get a real closure. So just as Thomas mentioned, the society is quite divided. This crisis has been turning into political turmoil. Both sides have been getting like stronger and stronger in their positions. So when we look back at the coverage, for myself, I've been like covering both protests on both sides for quite a few months now. And I mean, at the very beginning, the one you would see the most like vocal people would be in Yeouido. Every night, people who were like very angry with the martial law, and people were against the martial law and wanted the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. But then, because he was kind of showing no remorse and he's been like calling to his supporters in the weeks coming after that, we've seen that the supporters of President Yoon Suk-yeol were getting stronger as well, more vocal. We could see them more and more on Saturdays, but also on other days of the week. And then we saw that really strong anti-China, anti-communist sentiment that has been going on strongly. And the result was a big distrust in the Constitutional Court, for example. So Thomas has been saying that, fortunately, afterwards, this weekend, vast majority of South Koreans have said that they accepted the decision, the verdict. But the National Barometer survey on the 13th of March was saying that 42% of the people were saying, if I disagree with the court verdict, I will not accept it. So it was kind of a bit of a scary moment. That's why unanimity was kind of necessary. Then just to balance it, the inquiry was saying that those numbers were actually the same as 2017, and they were kind of saying, at the time too, before the verdict, people were saying will not accept it, and it was accepted for the impeachment of Park Geun-hye. But it's interesting to see that this unanimity was really something that foreign press has been showing a lot. So for example, Jen McKenzie from BBC, she said that, and I'm quoting her article, the Constitutional Court was damning in its criticism of Yoon's authoritarian power grab because of this unanimity. And that's a way of showing a united front in a way so that critics could not weaken the position of the court.
Right, Chloe, as you mentioned, the 8 justices on the Constitutional Court appeared united last Friday in their decision. Thomas, Korea, as you mentioned in your report now, Korea needs to hold an early election within the next 2 months. What's the latest on that front? I understand we have a tentative date up there.
Yes, correct. So the date that I saw it reported in Yonhap, I think it hasn't been officially confirmed, is that it will be held on June 3rd. Which is basically 60 days. It's like the maximum amount of time since the impeachment was upheld. And reports say that acting President Han Duck-soo is going to confirm it tomorrow in a cabinet meeting. And I think they need part of that. The cabinet needs to approve a holiday for the day of the election itself. So there's some, technical details with that. And yeah, that's the same amount of time that happened after the Park Geun-hye impeachment was also the maximum, I think 60 days after the impeachment was upheld. And understandably, you've got to get everything together to run and hold an election. And so assuming that is the June 3rd date, then the other timelines are candidates need to register if they're going to run by May 11th, which is 24 days before, and then the campaigning would kick off the next day, which is May 12th, until June 2nd. And that's, the 2 main parties are also going to have to hold primaries to see who's going to run, and that we don't have dates for that. The People Power Party, I think yesterday, said that they're going to put together an election committee, and then they will figure out the details of the primaries. But I think, you're looking at probably late April for the parties to hold primaries to see who will run as their candidates. Just one other thing that has come up in this little period is that there's been a lot of discussion about also maybe bringing a national referendum for constitutional change or amendment on the same day as the election. And the Speaker of the National Assembly, Woo Won-sik, mentioned this yesterday in a press briefing, and he wants, he thinks this would be a good time to try and make some of the changes to the Constitution that have been kicking around for quite a long time, more or less to help to kind of weaken the power, curb the power of the presidency, and perhaps try to find some ways to allow the assembly to work more in a unified way, because these issues have been around for prior to several presidencies in the past, where there's this sense that the president has this kind of winner-take-all power at the start, uses their power. Then this 1 5-year term, they start to lose power as they become more of a lame duck. Opposition rises up, and you get these situations of political gridlock and kind of the president becoming more isolated. And I think that that did rise to an extreme, to some extent on both sides. Certainly, I mean, Yoon tried obviously the ultimate power grab, but the Democratic opposition party also had an unprecedented number of impeachment motions against officials. They really did try to, kneecap his budget. So I mean, not to say that justifies what he did, but there was a sense of political gridlock. And so the idea is that maybe this is the time to sneak this in or put this in before another president takes power, because then it kind of ends up getting lost in the whole political system. So that's something that I'm seeing discussed quite a bit. I mean, Lee Jae-myung seems to be a bit lukewarm about it, the likely maybe Democratic candidate, about holding this referendum during the election. But that's something else to keep an eye on ahead of the election.
Right, it is a developing story, of course. Moving forward, Chloe, Reuters published a piece about the top contenders for the early presidential election here, with the focus on 6 political figures. Now, let's go over the first 3 contenders. They are Lee Jae-myung, Chloe, Han Dong-hoon, and Kim Moon-soo. For our foreign viewers who may not be familiar with these figures, could you tell us a bit about them, as shared by Reuters, of course?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just to come back on the idea of the contenders, because the election will be coming fast, as Thomas was saying. And there's also an interesting point to see about the candidates that will be chosen. So the one that were shown by the article in Reuters, for example. So for the Democrat Party, it seems like Lee Jae-myung will be the top contender. But then it's interesting to see on the presidential, ruling party, the People Power Party, who will they choose? Because that's what we're all going to see. But just most of the contenders are either have made their stance known beforehand, whether they were in favor of the impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol or against it. So that would also show a bit of how the PPP is deciding to go and what's the stance they're taking on the situation. So to start with Lee Jae-myung, so he's the leader of the Democratic Party, so the opposition party, main opposition party. He's the top contender for this election. He has been polls have been shown, weeks after weeks, that he was the top contender in case of an election. Now that we know that it's the case, we'll see how it goes in the next polls. But he lost against Yoon Suk-yeol in 2022 with a very thin margin. And after that, we've seen last April for the legislative election, he was able to get his party to win the most seats in the assembly and making them the main party for opposition. So he's also obviously been well known. I would say probably that foreigners, foreign viewers, are knowing him more, because he has been strongly voicing his opposition to Yoon Suk-yeol martial law on the night of the 3rd of December, and afterwards with all the aftermath. We have seen him quite a lot coming back and showing his, how much he was not agreeing with Yoon Suk-yeol. So that's the main, I would say, top contender. But he also has his own legal battles that Reuters reminded us of. So there is one especially that could have gotten him to not be able to get elected for 5 years. He has been acquitted for now, but the prosecutors are going to appeal to the Supreme Court, so that could be a danger for him for the next election. Then we have Han Dong-hoon, who is the ex-leader of South Korea ruling party.
Han Dong-hoon, right?
Han Dong-hoon, sorry, yeah, and Han Dong-hoon is the ex-leader of the South Korea's ruling People Power Party. He had to step away because he has been a strong opponent to the martial law from Yoon Suk-yeol. So he was the one saying to the member of parliament at the time that they should vote as they wanted, but I mean, he was kind of showing that he was against the martial law, and that's why he had to step down from the leadership of the party. He's 51 years old. He's a prosecutor turned politician, and he's quite popular with moderate conservatives, but not that much for now with the people who were more stronger, like supporters of Yoon Suk-yeol. So that could play against him, maybe. That will depend on how much the people are, getting mobilization in the primaries. And so the last one that I will speak about is Kim Mun-soo. So he's the labor minister. He's 73 years old. He's the highest ranking member of the executive party in the polls that I was speaking about, so the tentative polls at the time. But until now, he was not saying that he would be a candidate because he was quite loyal to Yoon Suk-yeol. So when the question was raised by a reporter, he would say that the president was still president and not impeached. So he would not give his, position on a possible candidature to the presidential election. But he has criticized Yoon Suk-yeol arrest in January. He has criticized the impeachment hearing. So he is more on the loyal sides to Yoon Suk-yeol.
Right, so these are the first three contenders as shared by Reuters. There were Lee Jae-myung, Han Dong-hoon, and Kim Mun-soo. The final three contenders as published by Reuters was Oh Se-hoon, Hong Jung-pyo, and Kim Dong-yeon. Thomas, could you tell us a bit about them?
Yes, so the first one you mentioned, Oh Se-hoon, is currently the mayor of Seoul, and he's, I would say a fairly high-profile national figure. I don't know how well known internationally. And he's been mayor of Seoul. He's had 4 different terms. He's on his 4th term, and some have been, ended early, and then he took over. But he was from 2006 to 2011, and then in 2021 he won, and then won the election again after. And so, he has. I don't think he's announced his intention to run, but he's clearly for a while been staking out kind of a national profile, and he's taken some positions of kind of a national scale. I mean, the Reuters article you mentioned that he did talk about South Korea needing to, have its own nuclear weapon arsenal. So he's kind of, establishing that position. And some of his other recently, he's come out with this slogan. It's like KOGA or KOGA, Korean growth again, and he has a plan to stimulate economic growth, something like a 5% growth rate, and with regulatory reform, deregulation, things like that. So, he's clearly a figure that, has a high national profile, and the Seoul mayor's office is one of the highest profile, political positions in the country. But I don't think he's seen as a real top contender. I saw one poll, the Research View, from a couple of days ago, and I think he's in like the 6%-ish range as far as people's choice of who for the People Power. He's with the People Power Party, I should mention, by the way. He's also faces a little bit of a geographic challenge because he's based here, and a lot of the core constituency of the PPP is in the sort of South Gyeongsang province stronghold, and they have, there's a part of the primary voting where it's the public vote as well as the sort of party vote. So he's facing a headwind there. The next one you mentioned is Hong Jung-pyo, who is also pretty well known. He's the mayor of Daegu currently, which is in that. Really, that's like the core of the People Power, the conservative movement, and he ran against Moon Jae-in in 2017 and came in second among a group of challengers. He's 71 years old, and he's really, he's more of the kind of old school, hardcore conservative line. He really also has spoken out about nuclear armament. He's kind of anti-LGBT. He really appeals to the older conservative wing of the party, which is, as we've seen in these protests that have been happening, still a very vigorous part of the support of the PPP. He's already basically said he plans to run. Even this weekend, he was strongly intimating on Facebook that he's about to run. And today, actually on Facebook, he called for an end to the Constitutional Court, something, a way to bring it under the Supreme Court. He doesn't think it should stand on its own. He's kind of saying that it's subject to political influences. It's the center of political disputes. So, he's been more, I don't think he's been more supportive without being, I think, explicitly fully supportive of Yoon, but in that camp of supporting. And I think he would appeal to the types of hardcore supporters of Yoon. And I think even some of this younger male population that has moved to conservatives kind of likes. He also has kind of an outspoken, off-the-cuff style that seems to have appealed to some people. But I think he's also considered not the front runner. The last one is Kim Dong-yeon, who is in the Democratic Party, and he's currently the governor of Gyeonggi Province. And he was a finance minister before deputy prime minister, and he was, considered somebody who had a political future. He's not really seen as being too strongly on one side or the other. He has this very rags to riches background story, which was quite appealing. He's 68 years old. And he ran in 2022, but started his own party called the New Wave Party, and eventually sort of folded into the Democratic Party. But he kind of has represented a need to change the political structure. He's talked about kind of constitutional reform, limiting the power of the presidency. So, but he also does not have a great deal of political experience and doesn't, I don't think, have the kind of political infrastructure in place to make probably a serious run, but he's another one. His name is out there anyway.
Right, his name is out there as reported, of course, by Reuters. So
Yes.
These were the 6 political figures that Reuters recently spoke about with regard to being a contender for the upcoming presidential election here in South Korea, which you, Thomas, pointed out might be on June 3rd. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. So, Thomas, thank you so much for your time and thoughts. And Chloe, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you. Thank you. Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow, that is Tuesday, with more panel discussion on South Korea and its policies amid an early presidential election. Join us then.